I've always said that if you throw a rock in Lynchburg, you'll probably hit a Falwell, and some people are trying to. I used to always say that I was the black sheep of the Falwell family at times, but, I'm not 100% sure of that anymore. I want to bring fun and sexy back to aviation.
Man, if they can't drive cars, we're putting them in airplanes.
There's less things to hit up there. We flew Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead. We flew the Black Crows. Flew T-Pain a couple times. Yeah. I like that I'm recognized by T-Pain now. My grandfather taught me a long time ago, you don't fight the government, you don't fight the FAA. And all of a sudden, the cadaver in the back starts popping and making noises because the different pressure in the body. And he said that they had 3 or 4 co-pilots open the door like they were going to jump out of the airplane. The town of Lynchburg and the people in this area were just incredible with what they raised for us to be able to pay for the fuel and donating supplies and everything else to be able to take down there. When you're carrying a 3-year-old kid, that hadn't been able to eat or drink in 2 days and, trying to get him save his life. And that's the only way he's getting off the island. It's hard not to do it. Any
chance that Kyle Falwell's on a ticket at any point?
Too many skeletons in that closet, Rich.
Welcome to another edition of No Holds Barred. I'm Rich Roth, and my guest today, Kyle Falwell.
How you doing, Rich?
Hi, Kyle.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Happy to be here.
Good to see you too. We've known each other, I don't know, over a decade or so.
Scary.
I forget exactly how we met, but I know fantasy football had to be part of it.
I think that was probably the catalyst, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
And then away we go from there.
That's right.
Most notably, your company, Bonaire Jet, and it started out as Bonaire Brokerage, and we'll talk all about the airline business and, what you're doing as your business continues to grow. Looking at building a new hangar, and you're involved with city council, so we'll have some fun with that. But first and foremost, your last name. I mean, it's hard to get away from.
That it is. It's very, very recognizable here in Lynchburg.
What was it like? What was it like growing up with the last name Falwell in this town, and understanding that Jerry Sr. and Jr. and Jonathan are all kind of on the other side of the family? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. We can kind of, there's the aviation side and then the ministry side, so to speak, around here, and the many other sides. I've always said that if you throw a rock in Lynchburg, you'll probably hit a Falwell, and some people are trying to. But my grandfather and Jerry Sr. were first cousins. And so with that, close family ties, Jerry Falwell Sr., my grandfather and my great grandfather, all those properties kind of around Falwell Airport were all kind of connected. And so I can still go back on the old property and find where they were rolling tires down the hill from the old tire shop as boys and stuff like that. So my grandfather helped fly Jerry Sr. around when he was building the Moral Majority and all that kind of stuff. And actually, one of our twin engines, a 414 from back in the day, was one that was kind of gifted to Jerry Sr. back in the mid 70s, I guess. And that's actually the airplane I learned to get my multi-engine license in.
Oh, wow.
And so, but my grandfather flew, Jerry Sr., and then Jonathan and I were kind of going through flight school kind of around the same time. Jonathan has his pilot's license and everything. And so, there's, here in the Falwell, but, it's about going back to the name here in Lynchburg, there was probably some times younger when it helped me when a police officer pulled behind me that might not have gotten that ticket. But then there's other places you go that people, they feel, it's a pretty polarizing name either one way or the other. And some people like it and some people don't. You just kind of roll with it.
Well, what about for you? Now, again, we've known each other in adulthood. But I understand, you had a bit of a wild side when you were a little bit younger.
Yeah.
And again, with that last name,
Well, I used to always say that I was the black sheep of the Falwell family at times, but, I'm not 100% sure of that anymore. But, Yeah, when I was younger, I had a little bit of the wild side on me, and but yeah, and it was people quite couldn't understand how I was a Falwell at times. But we also, my mother's side of the family was the Candler side from Candler's Mountain and all that, and the Candler side had a little bit of a wild background
as
well.
That right?
Yeah, and so I think those genes might have been a little bit heavier in me in my youth, and now the Falwell genes might hopefully be taking over a little bit. We'll see.
Okay.
But yeah, that's how it kind of went down.
All right. You joked about being the black sheep. Obviously, that all may have changed a handful of years ago. What was your reaction when all this stuff started breaking with Jerry Jr.? Because we talked about being in a fantasy league, and obviously jokes are flying all over the place and whatever. But that must have been.
It was interesting.
Yeah,
it was interesting. I guess the most was Jerry's daughter's named Caroline and my daughter's named Caroline. So there's two Caroline Falwells in the world. And my daughter wakes up and she was, I think, 17 at the time. She goes, "Dad, I've got 3,000 new followers on Instagram." I was like, well, you might not want to answer all those or take those followers. They might not be for all the right reasons. And luckily at this point in my life, I'm established enough. But when the kids, they had to hear a little bit more than they even knew about with all that. So it was an interesting time for sure.
You talked about having a wilder side growing up. What kind of helped to change that for you?
Well, having kids kind of anchor you down pretty quick and change everything. But yeah, so, I had my daughter when I was 26. And then she moved to Lynchburg full time when she was 8 years old, and that kind of was the push I needed to get a little bit more serious in life and buckle down a little bit and start acting my age a little bit more than I had been.
A little bit more,
just not all the way, but just a little bit. So can't just jump off all at once. You have to ease into that.
Understood. And talk about parenthood, because you have two kids. Right, Caroline and H, and not married. Kind of raised them both yourself for the most part. Is that fair to say?
No, not totally, but they're my daughter, as I said, she moved to Lynchburg when she was 8. To go to VES, and then my son, he lives here in Lynchburg, and half between his mother and I. But yeah, it was something that definitely I wasn't preparing for and hadn't planned on, but it was. As I said, it was the best thing that happened to me as far as helping me kind of settle down and stop doing as much dumb stuff as I used to do. So I can't say it's all gone, but it definitely helped.
What was kind of the first step there? Like, as you talk about, growing up and maturing and acting closer to your age than you might have been. What did that look like in terms of business, real life? What changes did you make?
Yeah, it was kind of, you don't see it coming sometimes. And, all of a sudden you start doing things that you're kind of surprised. And one was even I started coaching my son and daughter's swim team. And
I remember.
Your kids were there. So, that was something I never planned on, but that was kind of a real... It was an experience for me, being able to, then see a lot of different ways that other parents parent and that kind of stuff. And so, that was definitely something. And around the same time, I started another company called Bonaire Drone. And so, with both those kind of filling up all my spare time, and then with the kids on top of it, that's probably the best thing, is it just cuts I guess they said the idle hands of the devil's playground.
Right.
Well, I didn't have any idle hands anymore. So that was probably the best thing for me that helped, cut out some of the shenanigans.
So, all right, speaking of the shenanigans, and you don't have to get into too much detail, but growing up in this town, with that last name, did you need to be more careful? Were you cognizant of that, or were you just like, who cares? I'm doing it.
No, I got more and more cognizant as I went along too. So, I ended up, when I was going to do something, a little bit, I decided to stay more under the radar, I guess I should say. After you get kind of hit in the forehead a couple times, I get a little smarter. But you realize that, you can't do certain things in Lynchburg, and that you're going to have a little bit more of a target on you. And so I moved down to North Carolina when I was 17, and from 17 to 22, I was down there training horses professionally. And so I did get quite a bit of the rowdiness out down there, but there was still some residuals coming back. And so, as I said, once I had become a father, I had to cut out most of that.
Was there ever a conversation with you with, your parents or grandparents or family members or whatever about, hey, look, you need to dial it back because you have this last name, and here in Lynchburg, and we hear about it all the time now. I mean, I think with, black people talking about, hey, you're black, you got to be careful when you get stopped by the cops. And I'm just wondering, I mean, was there ever a conversation where it's like, Kyle, look, it's not fair, but you have this last name and you live in this town?
No, I never had that conversation with my parents, and I guess probably because they knew that I was a terrible listener as it was. they probably knew that it was just going to be a waste of time to have that talk with me. But I'll say that. But then the other side of it too is when I moved back from North Carolina and started working on my pilot's license. That was a big changer too, because then all of a sudden aviation's not one that you can mess around with, and so. Unfortunately, we had an accident on my mother's side of the family prior to me being born that was carelessness with an aircraft as well. And so due to that family history and everything, that's something that weighed heavily on me. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, some people lost their lives back then. And so it's, with that, the aviation side of it, that was always a very cut and dry thing for me. There's no crossover, and there can't be there. It's very black and white when it comes to flying an airplane.
We'll get into the aviation thing in just a minute, because obviously that's a huge part of your story. But you're 17, you moved down to North Carolina to train horses. I had no idea.
Yeah, I did the hunters and jumpers, and so I grew up riding horses, and then kind of became pretty good at it, and so. I actually went down there when I was 14 years old as a working student, just to kind of be able to work under some of the top trainers in the world. One of them was Patty Roth, and she was Horsewoman of the World 8 times in her lifespan, I should say. And so I had the opportunity to go down there and work and clean stalls and clean horses and get the opportunity to ride some of her horses with getting a lesson under her a couple times a day. And so I went and did that when I was 14 years old, and then. One of the couples that kind of took me under when I was down there when I was 14, because it's a little bit of a different atmosphere down there. She actually passed away at Blowing Rock Horse Show, and so that was when I was 17, and I went down there for her funeral. And when I was down there for the funeral, one of the ladies had asked me to bring my saddle and ride a couple horses while I was down there. And when I was doing that, one of the owners saw me riding her horse and said, "That's who I want training my horse from now on." So they offered me a job when I was 17 years old, running a 30-horse stable down in North Carolina. And so I called my mom and said, "Send my transcripts. I'm not coming back." And went out, found an apartment, and rented the apartment, but couldn't get my heat turned on because I wasn't 18. So I'd sleep in front of my oven, but I couldn't tell anybody that because I knew my grandfather, and everybody would be like, "Well, obviously you got to come home." Right. So so that's kind of how it started. And I was down there till I was, as I said, about 21, and then I came back and kind of dove into the family business.
So you moved down there when you were 14?
No, I went down there for the summer when I was 14 as a working student. Came back, but had developed the relationships, and then I went back when I was 17 for the funeral, and that's when I got off the job. So
what was it about? You went down there, I'm guessing summer camp, something along those lines?
Yeah, no, it was, we originally went down there to look at a horse for my sister. We were down there looking at a horse for her. A horse came in that I said, "I want to get on that horse." And they put me on that horse and saw how I rode at that time. And so then they ended up offering me a summer, working student position.
Gotcha,
kind of.
Okay.
And not like camp. I wish it had been like camp, but it was, 12, 13-hour days and just working your tail off to get the opportunity to ride under some of the best professionals out there.
What was it about that it didn't stick?
Very political. So, the horse business is there's a lot of money, and it was, I got down there in some of the bigger circles with some of the bigger money, and and then it gets to who you know, not what you how you do kind of thing. And so the politics of it kind of turned me off. And then I got into more of training the babies and breaking the babies and doing that kind of stuff. And so that took the politics out of it. And I knew I could do some of that here while I kind of dove back into the family business. And plus I'd been away for years and kind of ready to get back to Virginia. And plus, the horse business is 24/7. You never get a day off. The horses, they have to eat, they have to be brought in, they have to be cleaned, all that kind of stuff. And I'm the lowest man on the totem pole, right. So I was the one that was doing a lot of that heavy lifting back then. And so it just, after a while, you just kind of burn out. And so I was burnt out. So we were on the A circuit and traveling all the time from horse show to horse show to horse show too. And so it just, over time, it wears on you a little bit.
What was that like?
It was fun. I mean, there was a lot of fun times. But yeah, I mean, I was getting to do what I'd always wanted to do. And so finally, and I got to show in some of the top events in the nation and do things that I always thought I could. And I was able to be competitive in it. And so I kind of achieved, checked those boxes, so to speak. But there was also a cap on it, and there's, it's a lot like the aviation business. If you want to make $1 million, you better start with 10. And so, at that time, I didn't have that kind of financial backing to be able to do that. So, kind of started looking at other ways, and plus, I was looking at the most successful people in that business, and all of them, the most successful, were just worn out too. And I sat there and went, is that how I want to be when I'm 50 years old, 60 years old? And the glitter wore off of it a little bit for me.
So were you just training horses, or were you riding in the events?
No, I was riding in the events.
You were, okay.
So I trained only the horses. I didn't, at that point, I wasn't training people. I was just training the horses. So I'd get on the 2 and 3 year olds and start, breaking them and then taking them over the fences and doing all that kind of stuff and the jumps, and then getting them prepped and ready for their owners to be able to get on them later down the road is kind of what we were doing.
So is that like dressage? Is that right?
Well, the dressage is the flat part of it. It's everything prior to the jumping. So the dressage is kind of the foundation of what you teach the horses to be able to get them to the next levels, be able to do the jumping and stuff like that. And then the hunters is going around a course as smooth and nice as a manner. Usually it's an 8-jump course, and it's all based on the judge saying, oh, that's the prettiest round, and based on pretty much who they knew and who they wanted to win. But, the horse's movements and how the horse pulls the knees up over the jumps and all that kind of stuff is what's being judged there. And then after that, then the jumpers are where you're going around for the fastest time going across the jumps like you see in the Olympics and stuff like that. And, and try not to knock a rail down off the fence, because those are penalties and time penalties and stuff like that.
So are you still involved with horses at all?
No. And so
not even owning them or riding?
No, I trained my last baby probably 10 years ago, when my mom tried everything she could to even try to get my daughter back in it. And I fought as hard as I could and kept her in a pool instead.
Why? Just because of the nature of the business?
Yeah, I'd been down that road, and I didn't want to see her kind of go down that road. And I thought that there were better opportunities.
I've had some other friends who have had kids who have horses and shown them or whatever, and I mean it sounds expensive, and I mean there's a lot of. It seems like there's an awful lot that goes into it, and you talk about the politics and all that. I mean. Kind of a there's a shadowy side to it. Is how we can put it. I think. All right, fair enough.
And so, kind of wanted to keep the kids away from that. And as I said, I spent my entire kind of childhood doing that, and seen both sides of it. And as a dad, I thought, I think there might be healthier things I could get her into.
So you come back, and at that point you get your pilot's license, but I'm willing to assume and bet that, I mean, growing up in the airline industry with your dad and your uncle, both having started Falwell Aviation and, the airport, and that's different from the current airport.
Yeah, so right? they started, it was actually my grandfather and Calvin Falwell, my great uncle, and Lawrence and Calvin they started Falwell Airport. They had Falwell, they had Falwell Fast Freight, Truck Body Corporation, Falwell Well Company. I don't know how they did all that back in the day without cell phones and everything
Right.
else. But yeah, that's how they actually got into the aviation business. Is they had Lynchburg Bus Service and Falwell Fast Freight, and they had some terminals all across the East Coast. And a good friend of them, there's Woody Emerson, brought and dropped off a Piper Cub and dropped it off on the old Falwell farm at the time. It wasn't an airport. Now it's an airport, but he dropped it off and said, y'all need to learn how to fly, and I'm going to teach y'all how to fly, and then that's the way y'all can go out and visit your terminals and all that kind of stuff. So, both Lawrence and Calvin, they got their license and then started buying some airplanes, and then, they moved the fence line for the cow pasture there at the farm so they could have a runway, and then they slowly kept expanding that runway, and then the airport kind of grew around it. And so I think Falwell Airport was initially, the cement outside the main airport says 1941, I think. So, but it was kind of, back then that they started building an airport.
And that's the one that's kind of out more towards where
that's on 460,
where 460 kind of meets like 29 bypass now, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Where our new jug handle is there.
But that's not where Bonaire and
Bonaire's at Lynchburg Regional, and so I started it actually kind of at Falwell Airport and Lynchburg, but primarily at Falwell Airport. So I was instrumental in building Liberty University's flight school. And we kind of started that out of Lynchburg Airport. We had 8 students from Liberty, and Ernie Rogers was big in the program at that time and came to me, and we built the curriculum, and we had 3 little Cessna 152s that we had been using for flight training at Falwell Airport. And we said, well, bring your 8 students over there, and we kind of built it from there. And then one day I came back and we had 8 airplanes, and Falwell Airport's unique. It's got the steepest runway east of Idaho. It's a 10% slope and you only take off down the hill and land up the hill. So, which
that makes sense.
Well, typically you do it into the wind. You land into the wind, take off into the wind. But at Falwell Airport with that steep of a runway, it doesn't matter. So it's not the ideal training environment. And I came back and we had 8 airplanes lined up on that hill, and I thought, well, this probably isn't the best idea. And so at that point, I ended up signing and taking over a lease over at Lynchburg Regional, and we moved the whole operation over there that December, and then started building a full FBO out of there. And so we built, and then we had some jets at the time, and so we kind of just put everything under one roof over there, and kind of grew from there, which became Falwell Jet Center at the time. And then Falwell Jet Center ended up selling to Liberty University. And after that, I went off and did my own thing for a couple of years and built another flight school and everything. And then, but Bonaire was originally started to buy and sell airplanes. That's why it started as Bonaire Brokerage. It was to buy and sell airplanes for the Liberty Flight School as it started to grow. So every time, we were using a broker at one point. I said, well, I kind of know more about these now than that guy does. And so I started Bonaire Brokerage just to start buying and selling the airplanes for the flight school.
Let's back up a little bit. You get out of the horse business. You come back to Lynchburg. You'd obviously, had plenty of experience in the aerospace industry, just because of the history and heritage. So what made you decide to get back into the family business? I mean, you talked about, Lawrence, your grandfather, and Calvin kind of starting the airline industry here in Lynchburg.
Well, not the airline, but the aircraft charter. It's a little bit different from airline, obviously, but aircraft charter. My grandfather and Calvin got back in the day, they had one of the largest fleets on the East Coast. And back then, a big part of what they did was flying checks around for the banks. So at night when the banks closed down, they had to get all the checks from the local branches to wherever their main branch would be in Greensboro or wherever, Charlotte. Oh, wow. And so they would fly all the paper checks down and around to get them to the, and that was all on the backside of the clock after hours. And then along with that, another big portion of the business back then was flying dead bodies, cadavers. Then the airlines wouldn't take them. And so if you had a family member or someone that, passed away and, you need to get their body back, that was a big part of the business then. And so,
wow.
but yeah, so they had a large fleet flying around doing that. And that's how a lot of guys wanted to get in and build time and, get up to that point to start flying. So the flight school grew around that. And in aviation, it's always one thing just leads you to the next step. It's a very stepping stone industry. And so the more hours you have, that allows you to fly the next bigger airplane. So I came back, and my grandfather, he was, I guess, in his, early 80s then, and he, wanted to, step back a little bit. And so he asked me to kind of come and start helping him with the airport. And I don't do anything just with one foot in. So I dove headfirst into it. And that's where we really started, as I said, expanding the flight school with Liberty. And at the same time, we were taking all the airplanes down to Greensboro and getting maintained down in Greensboro. And I saw the opportunity to start the maintenance here and save a lot of money by maintaining them here. So we built our own jet maintenance shop and with the proper mechanics needed to do that. And that's kind of how it started all building back up.
All right. So you come back. Was there an aha moment for you where you're like, man, I really need to get back into this? Or what was it that triggered, you come back, you're done with horse training. Did you know you were going to get back into?
No, I kind of just kept on seeing more and more opportunity, and every time I looked at one thing, I would see another opportunity. And I just kind of kept on saying, well, let's try this and let's try this. And it kind of just started growing around itself. And then obviously having my grandfather and, and the family support and all that. And that way that when I did something dumb, they could slap me on the head and say, hey, don't do that again.
Right.
But that's, so, and as I said, then, when Falwell Jet Center and Falwell Aviation sold to Liberty as a whole, that kind of went off and did my own thing for a couple of years, and then I had the opportunity to take over a hangar back here in Lynchburg that had become available, and then so that's when I moved Bonaire brokerage at the time back over there, and at that point, I had one jet and a couple little single engine airplanes that I was managing, and that was right at 10 years ago, and now it's grown since then.
All right, so what was it, though? Was there one defining moment or anything where you're like, look, I'm done with the horse business, I see the opportunity, or was it,
I was still kind of doing them both parallel. Even when I moved back to Lynchburg, though, I had a couple babies that I was still working with. My mom had a horse farm out off Trent's Ferry.
So as far as the flying part, though, how young were you when you? Well,
so that was I started when my first logbook entry when I was 8 years old. So it was my first flight lesson in my logbook. So I was always kind of in it and flying.
Wait. Do you need to be a certain age to be a pilot?
Well, you can't get your license then until you're 16, but
okay.
But you can start taking your lessons at any time. And so
you can technically have a pilot's license before a driver's license.
Oh yeah. So my dad actually had his pilot's license before his driver's license. Wow. A lot of kids do that. So
really,
yeah. So.
and we're good with that?
Well, if you've got the right training, Rich, I've seen some terrible kid drivers.
Yeah, I know, me too. And that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, man, if they can't drive cars, we're putting them in airplanes.
There's less things to hit up there.
Oh, Lord. So you logged your first flight at age 8,
mm-hmm.
and you got your license 16, 17?
No, because once again, I was, that's when I went down to train the horses. And so I came back and I really dove in. I guess when I was 20, I started sitting there going, okay, well, and I took a little bit more time to get my private, still trying to decide if that's kind of what I wanted to do. And it was really kind of the business side of it that excited me. Mm-hmm. You grow up around aviation, it's not something new and shiny, and so it wasn't, it didn't excite me then like it does now. So it was kind of the business side that excited me first. And then with that, I needed all my licensing and everything else. And Calvin, my great uncle, he was also very big on the political side of it too, and sat on a ton of boards and stuff like that. And he got me into sitting on some of these boards at a young age and that kind of stuff. And so it was all of that, that side of it that kind of kept drawing me in and seeing some opportunities that I could, take advantage of.
Now, you said one of the things you didn't like about the horse industry was the politics of it. Yet here you're talking about
horse politics and the politics that I'm talking about is having Falwell Airport. It's a public use airport. Mm-hmm. So there's federal and state funds that are available through that from the transportation taxes and stuff like that. So I got involved in really kind of trying to pull some of that money towards Falwell Airport to get improvements there. And that's actually where we went from 24-foot wide runway to a 50-foot wide runway. Just getting a GPS approach so you could come in there in bad weather and stuff like that. So that's the politics side that I'm speaking of in that. And that's a much cleaner side, believe it or not, than the horse politics.
Man, I could only imagine what the horse politics is like. Yeah. Because, and we'll dive into this in a little bit, but I mean, you're super involved in local politics, city politics, right? Involved with, city council and at council meetings. I mean,
not intentional though. So, the facility that we rent at Lynchburg Airport is owned obviously by the city. And so, in order to secure your leases and that kind of stuff, you have to go in front of city council. So those aren't. I'm not into those politics by choice, but that was a necessity to be able to get the rent on our new facility.
You're back from horse training. You're getting more involved in flying. I mean, your grandfather helps, along with his brother Calvin and Lawrence, right? They kind of form the private charter portion of what's going on aviation-wise here in Lynchburg. Your dad as well. Now you're getting into that business. Did you think it was going to be long-term?
I wish I could say I put more forethought into this kind of stuff, but I just kind of, no, I never really thought of it, to be honest with you, Rich. I mean, obviously, once I, started founding Bonaire and my own companies and stuff like that, then then you start thinking of it as long term. But at that point, on the Falwell Aviation side, it was really just trying to follow in the big footsteps that I was very frankly, nervous about trying to follow in. Mm-hmm. My grandfather, he and I were very different people. He ended up being one of my best friend in the world. But he never had a sip of alcohol, and wore coat and tie every day, and I'm in flip flops and long hair at the time, and so being able to fill his shoes was something that I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be able to do, but I wanted to make them proud, and I wanted to see build on the success that they had already had, and that's really kind of what drove me more than anything, was trying to show them, hey, we can keep building on this and make it better, and let me show you what I can do, and little different ideas, and some of that challenged me to always just kind of keep pushing the envelope a little bit. Yeah,
you talked earlier about having kids at a relatively young age, mid-20s. Still feels a little on the younger side, right? I mean, obviously people have kids younger than that, but so you said that kind of helped you grow up and mature, but it also sounds like the legacy of your father and especially your grandfather really weighed heavily on you as, hey, look, if I'm going to do this, I can't half-ass it.
Well, yeah. And I mean, and yeah, absolutely. And as I said, Calvin and my grandfather had built, my dad and all the Falwells on that side had built a, very strong reputation of on the aviation side. If we're going to do it, you're going to do it the right way. Mm-hmm. And so that was something that we definitely had to. If I was going to do it, I wasn't going to let them down and do anything to tarnish their name. And so it's something, and that's always part of it. Is how far can you push without getting outside the lines and that kind of stuff. And
that can be a lot of pressure too, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, when Falwell, Aviation and Falwell Jet Center sold, it was, it was kind of a very bittersweet thing for me, but it was finally where, it allowed me to then really kind of do things in a different way. And so then when that's one of the things that was the big change too. When, I wasn't operating under the Falwell Aviation name anymore, I got to do Bonaire and do things in a different way. And so that was one of the things that I told Shelley, who was working for me at the time, and Shelley had come in when we were still at Falwell Airport, and she was a freshman at Liberty, but came in with a tie-dyed shirt on and a hemp necklace. And I said, "You don't seem like the typical Liberty person. You want a job." And she ended up helping me build Bonaire in a great way. But she, and what's crazy is her father ended up, he was a pilot on the SR-71. Her mom flew a Gulfstream. They were friends with Chuck Yeager, and so I picked the right person to help me. But but when we started Bonaire over at Lynchburg, the second time, I told her, I said, "Listen, I want to bring fun and sexy back to aviation. Aviation had gotten a little sterile and so that was one of our focus points at that point too, was to kind of have fun and bring the sex appeal back to it and do it in a little bit of a more relaxed way. And it's paid off for us. The team we have now is a team that you look forward to coming to work with every day. And there are plenty of practical jokes that are played in the office, and we have a good time. We have our own fantasy leagues and all that kind of stuff, and so it's a fun group. And I think that's because of that initial vibe when we built it. I built it this time. I said, "This is how I want to do it."
So I wanted to ask what you meant by bringing fun and sex appeal back to the aviation business, but you're talking more as just a culture in your company,
correct,
than anything
that's exactly
related
right.
to the business. Yep. Okay. So just to clarify, everything that you've got going on now through Bonaire is, I mean, it's no longer really what your grandfather and his brother built, right? That got sold off, and you've started something kind of that's all your own.
Yep, Bonaire's all falls on just these shoulders these days. So for the good and the bad. But it's So when Falwell Aviation sold, then as I said, Bonaire was wholly mine, and so I kind of, and once again, I got to build it in the direction I wanted to build it, and do things that my grandfather probably wouldn't have done. But all in all, it's kind of worked out.
For example,
is my grandfather, he never liked me flying these jets single pilot, and so. But that's something when I was building this company, that there are certain guys out there that wanted to buy airplanes that wanted to still save money. And so I was able to go out and get my single pilot waiver and fly on single pilot. And that's just something my grandfather, he wasn't a fan of and stuff like that,
because of the safety issue.
Yeah, just the safety issue. My grandfather, he was always ultra conservative on that kind of side, which I love. When you've got to be, but there's still a way to operate these jets safely in a single pilot capacity, and you have to know what your personal minimums are. And and back then, being younger and dumber, that my personal minimums might have been lower than they even are now, but which they shouldn't have been. But that's that's the difference is, just being able to, I didn't have to worry about his name and reputation anymore. It was only going to be my own.
That begs the question, as clearly as important as, his legacy, your dad's, like your family legacy in this industry, as important as that is to you, and you striving to really make sure you upheld all that and honored the history and tradition of what they had done. Did you ever consider, once you started Bonaire, after you had sold Falwell Aviation, did you ever consider bringing the name back?
No, because, at that point, Liberty had bought Falwell and bought the name, and they even still have the call sign and that kind of stuff. And,
okay.
And actually, and I started Bonaire really in 2006 is when I first founded it, buying and selling the airplanes.
And that was the brokerage side, right?
Yeah, it was the brokerage side. But, and by that point, too, when I came back over and having the jets, Bonaire was starting to get its own legs and its own name. And so, and it was, and it's two different companies. And so, and as I said, so this was, something I could take some pride in building from the ground up. And so, so no, I never thought about going back to the Falwell side.
Obviously, the aviation side of it is huge for you, right? I mean, that's what you've built your whole company around. But you also seem very entrepreneurial in terms of, you mentioned Bonaire Brokerage is where it started, and then there was Bonaire Drone, and then you expand into maintenance and lots of stuff on obviously the aviation side, but you've experimented with a lot of other types of businesses as well. And I mean, I remember one, I don't know, what was it, 6 or 7 years ago, where you were putting a group together to try and buy a building downtown that would be a music venue, and you got into the music industry. Pretty hardcore, right? At one point. Talk about that for a second.
Well, it's music's something that's near and dear to my heart, and so I met some guys through the Bonaire drone side of it, doing drone work for music festivals and stuff like that. And with that, a couple of the guys in that industry talked me into coming in partners with them on the building downtown, and so we bought the old City Auditorium downtown. And for certain reasons, it didn't work out, and so we ended up selling the building. I learned quickly to stay in the industry that
Stay in your lane.
I need to stay up, so I'm staying firmly in my lane these days. But yeah, so I mean that. But you don't. Unfortunately, as I said, I don't listen that well sometimes, and I learned the hard way. And I learned the hard way a little bit on that one, but. It was something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to see a music venue downtown Lynchburg, and so I still think there's a big opportunity for that. Lynchburg needs something that brings business, into the city instead of everybody leaving Lynchburg to go to Roanoke or Charlottesville to see music. And so, the new pavilion, the amphitheater downtown, is a great start to that. We actually did a concert, Steve Miller down there, and it ended up being 108 degrees, and there was no shade, and we had to push it back, and I lost a little bit of money on that deal too. But that was kind of my thought process on it. Is I really wanted to see something, Lynchburg be able to bring the music here instead of everybody leaving to go see music elsewhere. But yeah, that didn't work out for me. But thanks for bringing that one up.
Well, you're welcome. But Kyle, you know as well as I do, right? And we hear lots of really, really successful people, and I'm talking ultra successful. Elon Musk. I mean, they talk about their failures are more important to them than their successes because what you learn from it. And so many of the most successful people have a ton of failures, right? I mean, that's really where you learn a bunch of stuff. And I'm imagining you learned a few things from that auditorium project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, one of the things I learned is stretching yourself too thin, and so you only have so much bandwidth. And so that's one of the things is now even with Bonaire that we really kind of took that and brought it down even more. And, we've actually turned jets away because they aren't what I knew the best being Cessna Citation jets. And I've had, people come and say, hey, we want you to manage that. And especially as we were growing this business, I turned them down because I wanted to keep our focus on what we were the best at. And that's where I learned that, back in the day in my 20s and 30s, I'd sit there and go, oh, no, yeah, we can do it. Bring it to us. Well, you can't do it all. And that's kind of what I learned from, some failed ventures and stuff like that is that, the more you can focus on what you're good at and just really hyper focus on that, the better off you're going to be.
Are there other lessons that you learned from things that didn't work out the way you'd hoped?
Well, I've always said that you've got to be able to pivot too, and so where you can be hyper focused on something, you've got to be able to pivot too, and make sure that you're not that you're changing with the times too, and trying to stay ahead of something. I mean, a prime example is you're talking about all the Bonaire businesses. I started Bonaire Aerosol, and that was a sanitizing sprayer that we developed during COVID. And we came up with that because, all of a sudden, people wanted our airplanes to go pick them up in New York and take them down to their Florida house so they could lock down there. And, at the time we're sitting there going, oh my gosh, New York's a hot spot. How are we going to sanitize these airplanes? Well, we use isopropyl alcohol for a ton of things in aviation. So I had 55-gallon drums of that where nobody else could get it. So I developed a sprayer that would spray them and pull the oxygen out by using CO2 instead and not be flammable. But that's how we started sanitizing the airplanes. And from that, we took it to market. And so during COVID, all my employees stayed with me because we ended up not flying airplanes once everybody got grounded and on lockdown. But everybody kept their job and we kept making money because of the sprayer I developed. And without that, Bonaire probably wouldn't be around today, with where it is now, because of being able to retain the guys I had was very important at that time. So
just describe the sprayer in a little bit more detail.
It was a backpack sprayer, and as I said, we used CO2 and so that would pull the oxygen out and make it non-flammable. So you could actually take it right across a cooking surface and open gas, because isopropyl alcohol is very flammable, obviously, but this took the flammability side of it out. And then from there, we actually partnered with another guy that I was managing 2 of his airplanes at the time. He had a company called ICI Cameras, and they did all the temperature scanning using thermal cameras. So with his technology and my sprayer, and then we got into the checks and all that kind of stuff. But we started a company called Prevent, and then with the focus of getting music venues back up and going, because the CDC at that time had said that a concert was the most dangerous thing during COVID that there was, but right. Being heavy in music, we wanted to see a way to get live music back up and going. So that's so that whole company Prevent spun off of the Bond aerosol sprayer and the thermal cameras and bringing that kind of under one roof. And
So describe the sprayer. I mean, it's a backpack sprayer. What are people spraying?
Any surface. So, I mean, at that time, we had people buying them just because they're Amazon packages, and they didn't want to touch their Amazon packages after they were delivered, and they would spray and sanitize them that way.
Really?
And so, it would kill 99.9% of the germs, and with isopropyl alcohol, and so you could spray anything that you wanted with it. And we actually, we went out and we had guys that were going out and spraying playgrounds and all that kind of stuff to sanitize them between uses. And, it kind of turned into a big company for a couple, for a year or so. But as I said, it was the income that we needed to be able to keep Bonaire going through that time where we had no other income coming in.
Yeah. I mean,
we still have insurance to pay on the airplanes. You still had hangar rent to pay. You still have all the expenses piling up too. But without any flights and without anything else going on, you don't have that income to pay those expenses. So that's what helped us keep the doors open through COVID.
Yeah, that pivoting part of it was huge because, like you said, and there are so many other businesses in similar situations. Like, what do we do now? People can't come, and the ability to pivot. How did that? Was that your idea right off the bat? I knew that,
where it kind of stemmed from was nobody could get isopropyl alcohol. And then here I had 55-gallon drums of it, and I could get it through the aviation kind of side of the house. And so that's kind of where the idea first started from. And then kind of just started doing, unfortunately I had a lot of time sitting there and so I was like, and started just researching stuff and how we could make it less flammable. And so it just kind of spun around and had a bunch of different prototypes that didn't work. And then we, found something that did, and it just kind of grew from there. So, you get lucky sometimes too, I guess.
Crazy, man. I had no idea about that.
Yeah.
I had no idea about that. All right. So it starts off, and we're looking at Bonaire now specifically. So you're in the aviation world. Right. Your family's company gets sold off to Liberty, and you start your own, first with the brokerage business, then with Bonaire Drone, which kind of helped get you, into the music business. And you've said that the music industry and music in general, you've been a big fan of, have had a passion for. Tell me about, some of that, because the drone part of things and filming and shooting some of these concerts, open more doors for you in the music industry.
Yeah, I mean, it did. So, I mean, that's actually, Dave Fry, who was one of the owners of Lockn Music Festival. We went up there, and my cousin actually, he was helping set up one of the backstages for one of the very first festivals back there. And I just gotten a new drone that we're playing with Bonaire drone, and we go up there, and I see a guy on the bicycle and kind of being a little more reckless than I should. Was kind of out there buzzing this guy, and it ended up being Dave Fry on his bike, who owns the festival. And he said, "Hey, we just bought one of these. Can we, can you teach us how to use it?" And I said, "We can, but you legally can't for commercial use at the time, and you have to have a drone license." And he said, "Well, you have all that?" And I said, "Yeah." And so that we started off just using it year one out there for security, running around, and you wanted to make sure people weren't hiding drugs and stuff in the cornfields and sneak them in. And so we were utilizing it for that. And then from there, we kind of spun into doing a lot on the media side, and partnered with his partner's company, Pete Shapiro, who owns some big music venues around the United States, the Brooklyn Bowls and the Capitol Theater and stuff like that. They have a big media team. And so we started then just providing footage for them. And by year 3 of doing it, we had our own media team and doing all the videos and the recap videos and all that kind of stuff for Lockn. So, that's where, I kind of really got more and more into the music festival side. And we ended up doing that for a lot of the festivals, from Floyd Fest to Rooster Walk and some stuff like that. And then really during COVID, that's when I even got kind of heavier into the music industry, because I met some guys. So now, we don't, it's kind of cool. We've been able to now marry the aviation side and the music side. And so I've gotten to fly a lot of the bands that I love. And so that's been kind of a cool experience. And
are you still doing the Bonaire drone?
No. So we kind of shut that down, and once again to focus on what we needed. The reason I got into that at the time too is you had to have a commercial pilot's license to be able to operate a drone commercially. And then the FAA came up with a new 107 drone pilot's license. So then anybody could kind of go out there and do the training and get their drone license. So with that, my thought is when, on the commercial side, I had commercial pilots, and when they weren't flying airplanes, I could go out and teach them how to fly drones. And then we got, we did a lot with AccuPoint, a local surveying and engineering company, and helped them start utilizing drones in their business. And Ed and I worked closely on trying to figure out how we could certify surveys back in the day before anybody was doing that kind of stuff. We were doing a lot on the
and you're talking about surveying land.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we got into solar farms, doing inspections on solar farms with thermal cameras on them. You can go out there, and on a massive solar farm, one panel can be bad, and then that whole section won't work, and we can identify that panel because it will reflect light instead of absorb light. So with a thermal camera. So then we started figuring out how we could map the thermal farms and the solar farms and do that kind of stuff. But it's everybody saw so much money on the table, then they started coming up with specific drones that were just built to do those functions. And so kind of when I started seeing that, I didn't have the millions and billions that you might need to play in that industry with the big boys. And so I went and said, let's go focus back on the airplane side of it.
Getting back to the music side of things, you said that you've gotten to fly some of your favorite bands around, and I would imagine for a lot of people that and just meeting some of those folks would be super cool. But that led to you're flying them to a gig and you're hanging out backstage. I mean, you must have some really cool stories from that too.
This weekend was my birthday, and so I snuck up to 4848 Festival up in Snowshoe, because 3 of the bands that were playing there are 3 of the bands that I've flown around and become good friends with. Yeah, so we had a big time on Thursday night, and but yeah, so I mean, it's that's pretty cool that I can call and say, hey, I'm on my way up, and go backstage and hang out. But that one of the bands, the Infamous String Dusters, we flew. They had their bus breakdown a couple summers ago, and their manager I knew, and he called me and said, hey, we're in a bind. We need to be picked up in Baltimore and get to Wilmington, and we're not going to make it by a bus anymore because we've already lost so much time. So I flew up to Baltimore and took them down to Wilmington, it was supposed to just be that one flight. And I said, well, y'all are playing Atlanta tomorrow night. How are you getting there? So flew them to Atlanta and then came back to Lynchburg. And then we went out to the taverns in Tennessee and closed out there. So, we ended up doing 5 shows in 6 days and became pretty good friends. And so I try to go see those guys anywhere I can. But, we flew Phil Lesh from the Grateful Dead. We flew the Black Crowes. Flew T-Pain a couple times. Yeah. And, it's pretty cool to, get to meet those guys and see them on a different kind of stage than the main stage they're on usually.
Are they? Yeah, I mean, I've got to imagine they're way different in person than, their reputations.
Yeah, well, yeah, some are, some aren't. So I'll tell you, I mean, T-Pain, he could not have been a nicer guy.
Really?
His wife was actually served in the Navy as well. And Joan Stanley, who I've been flying with 28 years, he's a naval guy. And actually, one of the flights that was really funny is T-Pain and I we were flying him into Ottawa for a concert, a festival up there. And T-Pain had a little bit of a speckled history, like I had a little bit of a speckled past as well. And here we're the two that get detained. So here I'm the pilot, the captain of the airplane, and we get off, and immigration and customs is there in Ottawa checking our passports and anything. And one of the guys goes, I want both of y'all to come with me. And they take us and put us in a little holding cell there on the airport, a little holding room, glass paneled room and everything, and start just digging into us on questions and this and that. And anyways, at the time, the customs agent called T-Pain by the name T-Pain, which isn't his legal name or anything like that. And right then, that sent up the red flag to me. And I sort of kind of jumped in and started going after him, saying, listen, you're just trying to get yourself on the news, da-da-da-da. And then I said, let me guess, you're going to release us right before his showtime. And sure enough, he did. And anyways, I came out pretty steamed from that. And the guy that was working the airport there that picked us back up from the holding cell, he goes, yeah, welcome to Ottawa, where fun comes to die. But because of that, I was in New York a year later, and T-Pain was coming through, and everybody's trying to get pictures of it, and I'm just sitting over there, and he picks me and goes, Kyle. I was like, yeah. So I like that I'm recognized by T-Pain now.
It's so much more to talk about, and we're talking with Kyle Falwell here on No Holds Barred. So, I would imagine a ton of cool stories. You shared a couple with me. Some scary. I mean, you talk about a single pilot, right? And, obviously things happen, up in the air. I mean, way safer from what I understand than driving. But, you figure, man, one pilot up in a plane, something happens. I mean, who jumps in? How does that all work?
Obviously, yeah. I mean, when you're single pilot, that's you try to mitigate the risk as much as possible. But there's only one of you to help with everything. So you've got to be. So with that, if you're going to be, the single pilot authorization on the jets is a much tougher check ride than what they give when it's a crew of 2. So they put you in that left seat, and you've got nobody in the right seat. So you're working the radios, you're navigating, you're doing everything, and then they start giving you multiple failures. And one of the failures is, you've got one engine out, one engine on fire. Then they kill your electrical load as well, kill your electrical system. So then you're trying to navigate off the right side. So, they throw everything they can on you for those check rides to make sure that you can handle that kind of thing. And then obviously the big thing is the medical side for the pilot, making sure you're healthy. So you have to have a first class medical, in which we do every 6 months, and with that is an EKG and everything else. So we try to, obviously all that risk, we try to mitigate as much as possible, but it definitely is an elevated risk when you're single pilot. But yeah, that's all we can try to do is mitigate it.
Right. So, you touched on some of the cool experiences you had in the music industry, but obviously flying, you're going to meet different people, right? I mean, you're going to have different experiences. One of them, I mean, you were telling me about the 86 Mets.
Yeah.
And your grandfather
No, Calvin, my great uncle.
Right, Lawrence
Yep.
was your grandfather, and his brother was Calvin.
No. Yeah, correct. Lawrence is my grandfather,
Right.
and Calvin's my great uncle. Yeah.
See, you're so quick to jump on it correctly. And Calvin obviously responsible for bringing baseball to Lynchburg.
Yeah.
And it was the Lynchburg Mets way back in the day. And in 1986, I'm still a little snot-nosed kid in high school up on Long Island, rooting for my Mets. And lo and behold,
Here I was too. I was there.
You were there.
Yeah.
I'm watching on TV, but you're there.
Calvin hooked us up and sent us up there, and Calvin was great with that kind of stuff. I mean, I was not in my teens. I was a little younger than you, Rich. But went up there and went to New York, and they took us down after the game into the dugout, and who's your favorite player? And Darryl Strawberry.
Of course.
So Strawberry signed one ball for me, and then the whole team signed another ball for me.
Wow.
And so, so that was where, from there on, I've been cursed as a Mets fan for the rest of my life, and we haven't, gotten that close ever again. So,
been a while.
But we'll keep keep trying. This year, we had the payroll to do it, but just not the team, the management, or anything else.
I'm sure a lot of these stories. Probably were too young to be involved in them. But some of the stories I heard about some of those guys when they were in Lynchburg, I mean, Strawberry, Good, and Dykstra. I mean, good Lord.
Yeah, they were getting after it from what I hear, But they actually, some of them used to come to Calvin's pool and would swim in Calvin's pool, but swing their bats underwater to quicken their swing. And
Really?
So I'd go up there and. I was a little brat kid and jump in the pool with them. But it sounds like they had some good time.
What did I hear? I heard Trotters was a big big spot.
Yeah. Oh, Pippi Hughes, he used to own that, and I had some good time there. I was like Norm. I had my own spot at the bar, I think, when I probably shouldn't have. But Trotters was the old watering hole back in the day.
What other? I mean, baseball obviously huge. The Mets. Any other really just unbelievable memories about any of that?
I mean, they're all kind of, everyone's a little different. Obviously when I wasn't flying and doing stuff like that then, and now I love getting to and from just as much as the event sometimes itself too. That's it's funny whenever you're flying somewhere, the party on the way down is much better than the party on the way back in the back of the airplane. It's always very quiet on the way home, but on the way down, everybody's having a good time. But being the pilot, I have to sit there and tune it out and behave.
Man, speaking of those Mets, I mean, with Gooden, Strawberry, Dykstra, I mean.
All studs, man.
Dude, I mean, studs, but I mean, you look at later in life and, a lot of the adversity they had to deal with. I mean, Dykstra's in and out of jail. I mean, Gooden and Strawberry with their drug issues. I mean, and it all started here at Lynchburg.
What can you say?
Who would have ever thought it, right? So you get into the drone business, and that was relatively short-lived. I mean, it seems like lots of the businesses that you started, were pivots at different points in time to really help the business just keep going, right? Survive and advance during, difficult times, or whatever in some cases needs to be done is done. But what I understand is the one thing that kind of helped really establish Bonaire and help take you guys to the next level was organ delivery and organ, transplant organ flights. I mean, what's the word I'm looking for?
Yeah, I mean, it's organ transplant.
Okay,
transplant flights is what we do, and so that has been a big reason of our success. We had grown to a point where we had 7 jets, here in Lynchburg, which is a large fleet for Lynchburg, Virginia, for turbine jet equipment. But with that, what we were doing is I was kind of using, I've always been a big proponent of you don't reinvent the wheel. And so Warren Buffett had come up with a great, fractional ownership kind of deal and doing Part 91 flying where, it's called a dry lease and doing stuff like that. And so I kind of took that same model.
What is all? Explain all that.
So basically what you're doing is, so if you're utilizing an airplane for charter, it's basically like a taxi cab, but you have to have the licensing and all that kind of stuff to go with it, because anybody coming off the street can go ahead and just say, hey, I want to rent your airplane today, and they don't know anything about aviation, right? So the safety requirements by the FAA and everything are much higher, because they don't know what they're getting into. And so the charter side of it, which is called 135 charter, that's the highest level of renting your airplane. But what Warren Buffett came up with a net jets kind of thing when they first started it, is fractional ownership. So if you can't afford a whole jet, you might want to go, hey, I'm going to buy a 16th. You're going to buy a 16th, and you get, and fill it that way. I was kind of doing the same thing here a little bit in Lynchburg with fractional ownerships and putting multiple buyers in one, but then also, if someone wanted to utilize one on a regular basis, then we would teach them about this is how the maintenance works and this kind of stuff. And you could do what's considered a dry lease. And so with that, you're not having the FAA oversight and all of that kind of stuff. And so we were actually, because of that, that a bunch of companies ended up starting doing that, over the last 20 years, really. And the FAA created a whole new kind of category for that after NetJets got so big and everything else. And then Warren Buffett said, hey, these guys are stealing my ideas. And he went to his boys in Congress, and they started a special investigative unit, the FAA, to make sure that if you were doing it, you were doing it the right way. And we were one of the first people to get investigated. Our company was.
Oh, wow.
And anyways, what
was that like?
Well, it was very stressful. But basically, yeah, I mean, it shut us down for 3 days just to go through every record and everything we had. And at the end of it, the head investigator is a guy named Mike Thomas out of Houston. He and I actually got to be pretty good friends through the whole thing. And after that, he was calling me for, hey, what do you think about this and that? But he came to me at the end of it and said, listen, y'all are doing everything the right way. He said, y'all are the first company, one of the first we've investigated that we haven't found fault in. But he said, you've gotten too big. He said, and that's one of the reasons we came after you, was because you're with 7 airplanes doing this. And he said, I suggest you go back onto the charter side. And my grandfather taught me a long time ago, you don't fight the government, you don't fight the FAA. And I said, yes, sir, that's what we'll do. And so we partnered at that point. Gary Davis with Davis Air. He had a certificate in one King Air, and I had 7 jets. And I went to him and said, listen, instead of he was trying to buy one of our jets at the time. And I said, instead of buying one to put on certificate, how about we join forces and I put 7 airplanes on your certificate? And so with that, that's where we got back into the charter side. And Gary and his company Davis Air, they were doing some medical flights and stuff like that. And my grandfather and my dad had done organ flights a lot in the past and everything. So it was kind of one of those things where it was number one, it's for a great cause. You're saving lives. It's not an easy business though, because a lot of it's on the back side of the clock. But what
do you mean?
So
overnights?
they typically will book the operating rooms for like 3 to 5 a.m. because that's the least likely time that they're going to have another emergency or something come in where they'll need the surgeon or the OR. So a lot of these that are planned where someone's on life support and stuff like that, then they'll, that's when they book the ORs for that time.
Okay.
So a lot, so you're booking them, doing everything on the back side of the clock, a lot of it. But the reason it's a recession-proof business, and so that was something that kind of intrigued me about it. So we really hitched our wagon to that, and the organ procurement side of the industry. I mean, the organ procurement, or UNOS network is, I think it's growing at like 800% a year, something crazy like that. And a lot of that is because now there's more and more surgeons being trained to be able to do it. And now they've also got medical devices that keep the hearts pumping and lungs breathing and transport that really has extended the geography of how, because the organ can now be out of the donor to the recipient for a longer amount of time. And that's opened up the geography of how far we can fly it to find matching donor to recipient and that kind of stuff too. So, with the increase in surgeons and the transformation and technology and these devices, instead of just being in an igloo cooler, now they're actually on pumps and pumping and breathing, all that kind of stuff, that it's just really exploded. And so when we've been able to jump on and be part of that, that growth as well. So
you and your pilots, like the first time you're sitting there and there's like a heart in a cooler, like.
Well, the cooler you don't see because it's wrapped and everything else. But now with them on the machines, it's actually a clear top on the machine, and that thing is sitting there pumping as you're loading it into the airplane. It's pumping in your face, and I've had a couple pilots say, "This ain't for me."
Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, they get the file one time and they go, I'm not doing that anymore. And so. Now in the interview process, I've gotten a little bit better of being like, hey, let me tell you what you can expect here.
There may be a beating heart in the back.
I tell you, it's just like the same thing. My grandfather, he would tell me stories back in the day when they were flying the cadavers, and they would be in unpressurized airplanes, and they would go up, and a lot of times they're just on a gurney with a sheet over them, and the new co-pilot sitting in the right seat, and all of a sudden the cadaver in the back starts popping and making noises because the different pressure in the body. And he said that they had 3 or 4 co-pilots open the door like they were going to jump out of the airplane back in the day. So ours isn't quite that bad, but it's certainly something that you have to kind of be ready for.
Yeah, I think the cadavers could be a little bit.
I think that would have gotten me.
So you never had to do that.
No, thank goodness.
The organ transport flights, really a huge boon for your business. Still a big part of what you do, but that kind of allowed you to expand into different areas.
Yeah, so we've got 6. We've got 10 jet aircraft total that are on the certificate that are available for hire and for charter, so to speak. 6 of those are dedicated purely to the medical business. But what it's allowed us to do is, as we continue to grow, the pool of pilots, mechanics, everything's growing around it. So it just gives more support to everything else we're doing. We still focus a lot on, still want to focus a lot on the retail flights and find golfers around to play golf and people for vacation and business guys for meetings and that kind of stuff. But the organ the organ procurement business is kind of the foundation of what we've been building everything off of now.
Another thing that, and I don't want to say it's a big part of what you do, but you've obviously become known for it in this area, and I think there's a lot of gratitude. But some of the different relief flights that you've done. Hurricanes in the Bahamas, or what we saw in, the Asheville, Western North Carolina area. You're all over that. I mean, you're jumping in, you're flying supplies down, you're partnering with different, people and nonprofits here in town. You don't have to do that. Why do you?
I burned through a lot of brownie points, so I got to build them back up where I can reach. But no, I mean, it's, once you've done it. And so, the way we actually got in is, Jonathan was down there on his honeymoon in the Caribbean during Irma Maria. And he asked if I could come down and help. And when, and after doing that one time, you kind of see.
And that was a specific storm, right?
Yeah, well, yeah. So he was down there. I can't remember which one it came first, but Irma was coming and then Maria was coming right behind it, or vice versa. And so, they were going to get the 1-2 punch. And they did, although those islands got crushed down there. But he was down there for his honeymoon and got stuck there through the first one, and then voluntarily decided to stay through the second one. But at that point, he said, can you get down here and get supplies? And so I said, as soon as it passes, I'll be the first one down there and we'll get supplies in. And so that's kind of how it started. And then, so I got big into helping down there, and Jonathan, it was all the lower islands there. And then, St. Croix, St. John, Barrabuda, went all the way down to Barrabuda, which is pretty far down there. But then it came up and, Puerto Rico, and we got involved there as well. So, that's where it started. And then Hurricane Dorian, I had a lot of friends in the Abacos that I knew that were, impacted by that. And then so at this point, I reached out to Jonathan and said, hey, this time I need you to help me raise money to go down and help these people. And he was incredible with that support. And it was, we're one of the few companies that's not tied to an NGO. And so all of our funds were being raised by primarily people here locally. We did a lot of the internet stuff like that, but the town of Lynchburg and the people in this area were just incredible with what they raised for us to be able to pay for the fuel and donating supplies and everything else to be able to take down there. And so, yeah, it's once you do it and you see the desperation of those people, and every time I'm usually one of the first jets in. And so what I typically do is when I get in there, I take the non-responsive people out and get them to triage is one of the first things I do. And so, when you're carrying a 3-year-old kid, that hadn't been able to eat or drink in 2 days and, trying to get him to save his life. And that's the only way he's getting off the island. It's hard not to do it, And so, and what's amazing, though, is, a lot of these places that I've been, I've developed such close friendships with. And I mean, my daughter just, her best friend now that traveled Europe with her last summer and just went out to visit her in Colorado is from the Bahamas. And that's how we met through mutual friends down there from doing that kind of stuff. So, it's cool how it's built those relationships too.
Is there one flight? Is there one person? Is there one instance that kind of stands out about all the others, above all the others?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was going into Abaco and after Hurricane Dorian. And Dorian, it was 220 mile an hour sustained winds for 48 hours down there. It went and just parked itself over Abaco. And so, when I landed, I was the first jet in. And I went and helped scope the runways to see where we could land or report back. And so Treasure Key was the only airport that was above water after it moved out. Still 48 hours later, I finally was able to get into there. And by that point, all the people that had no homes, nowhere to go, there was probably 600 people waiting out at Treasure Key Airport just for someone to come in and give some relief. And so when I landed, I'd radioed back, and there was, I'll think about which hospital it was in a minute, but their jet was coming in. And they started immediately unloading their doctors and going and helping people. And that's when they came to me. And I was just planning, I had generators and water and food and supplies at that point. Now, my plan was just to be running back and forth supplies, to keep bringing people drinkable water.
From here?
Well, no, actually, we had set up, we were bringing supplies down, but we also had a hangar in West Palm Beach at the time, and that was filled with supplies to everybody down there. So we just had to start getting those supplies over, and that was my plan, is just to run 7 or 8 trips a day, just dropping off 4,000 pounds of supplies at a time. But all of a sudden, it was Cleveland Clinic, and the Cleveland Clinic's pilots and doctors came running up to me, and they said, "Hey, where are you going?" I was like, "Well, I'm going back to West Palm." They said, we've got 4 unresponsive kids here. We've got to get them to over to triage, which was set up. They had set up in Nassau at that point. And I said, well, okay. And so I was like, I need someone to ride with me. And they said, we can't separate our doctors. So at that point, I went out and I said, y'all find one person that knows nursing or something, but get them to ride with us, because I've got to focus on the airplane. And that's what we started doing, was running those unresponsive kids over to. And so I've got pictures and videos of me loading them up, and that it still kills me to go back and watch those now. But but that's why I can't turn my back on that kind of stuff. Is once you've been there and you've been with the mothers, and and we saved multiple children by being there.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did they all make it?
Yeah. So I mean, we actually, what was crazy is 2 of them came back on the airplane by getting water in them.
Really?
On the airplane itself, and the nurse giving them water, so 4 going in and 2 were responsive coming out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it's stuff like that. It's just amazing.
I understand why you wanted a medical person on board.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing here. I just fly airplanes. So yeah. But you learn a lot pretty quick doing that. But it's that's one of those experiences that I didn't really anticipate getting as involved as I did. When I first went down to help Jonathan figure out, I can deliver a load of supplies. Well, then you get down there and go, well, no, I mean, shoot, people are dying. I'm not going to turn my back here.
So is that anytime there's something, are you just automatically jumping in going, what can I do? Or
yeah, I mean,
does it depend on where it is?
It depends on where it is. It depends on the ability we have. I mean, like Jamaica, I had, a lot of the people that we've worked with now they're a lot of times the first responders going in, and they all know me personally, and I know them, and so they reached out to me and they said, they called after a couple of days and said, listen, we've got this under better control, and so we got plenty of airplanes and that kind of stuff. So now we kind of weigh it out. But if somewhere that's like Abaco, where I know those airports, I've been going in there for my entire life, and that's why I wanted to be the first one over there too, because I also, with the jet aircraft, and a lot of people aren't using jets for rescue missions right away, but I could go over there, scope out what airports, that kind of stuff, have plenty of fuel to sit out there for 4 hours if I need to, and still come back to mainland. And so that's why I ended up being the first one. I actually flew down to Fort Pierce and waited in Fort Pierce, which nobody ever wanted to do because everybody thought Dorian was going to continue coming straight to Florida. And I kind of sat there and waited. And if it did, I was going to hop down to Key West and go south. But it ended up making a turn up to the north. And so I came on the backside and was the first one in because of that.
I want to give you an opportunity to shout out some people here in Lynchburg. You already mentioned Jonathan and how instrumental he's been on a lot of these relief efforts that you've been a part of. Who else in Lynchburg, has really stepped up to?
There were other pilots that took their own airplanes after I'd kind of started slowing down a little bit. We had Mark Maslow, we had Jimmy Wendell, James Kuhn. The Lynchburg. It's just, once again, the support that came out of this city was so cool because we sat there and did more than what some NGOs were doing that are funded to do this and do this only.
We've learned a lot about NGOs lately.
Yeah. Well, a bunch of those. I had multiple of them come to me down there and say, "Hey, would you mind teaming up with us?" And I said, "No. We're good. We're doing our own thing." And I'm darn glad I did it that way. I think my grandfather from upstairs looking down going,
So with these, we're, obviously coming into hurricane or in hurricane season now.
It's always nerve wracking, especially, after what I've seen, but we've been lucky the last couple of years, and so, especially in the Atlantic, on the Atlantic side, I hadn't had anything too devastating. So we'll keep our fingers crossed and pray that trend continues.
You touched on this earlier. You just moved into a new hangar. You're looking at building another one. Obviously, needing the permission of the city and what's going on with the circus that is city council. And I know you have some buddies who are running for it. I'm sure you'd love to see them get in.
Yeah.
What's it like dealing with that circus?
It's you just don't know what you're going to get. So, but as I said, it wasn't something that we had kind of really planned on getting involved in, and then Freedom and look, it ended up building on ours, and so we kind of that had to go to city council to get approved and that kind of stuff, and I much prefer things to be done without having to get politics involved. But unfortunately, when you're a tenant of the city, we had to get a little bit more involved in that. But it's going to be obviously interesting to see what comes out of this next election cycle too, with all what we've already seen with the firehouse deal and this and that. And I just hope that it simmers down and gets a little bit more normalized, but not sure if that's going to happen.
I think everybody would maybe. There are exceptions. I'm an exception. I don't live in the city, and to be honest, it's entertained me, right? It's like, what's going on city council now? And, from that perspective, it can be a little bit fun for, people who it's not impacting. But we're seeing a bunch of people running now who, we never really thought, just because they're like, look, we need to get in and we need to get this thing normalized. Any chance that Kyle Falwell's on a ticket at any point?
Too many skeletons in that closet, Rich. No, sir.
You want to bring some of them out right now?
No, sir.
No?
None? No, sir. But it's as I said, that was kind of a frustrating thing for us to even be fighting that when we've seen how much growth we've had through the city and adding jobs and doing that kind of stuff. And then here we're sitting there fighting for a facility that we've outgrown basically. So but now we're in a good spot, and our new hangar is wonderful, and we are working with Cedric, the airport manager, on growth for a new 30,000 square foot facility. We want to start a maintenance repair organization, an MRO. We currently maintain just our own aircraft, but we want to expand that to outside aircraft as well. And so, having Liberty in our back door, providing they've got an A&P, which is an airframe and power plant mechanic school. So they're putting out tons of potential applicants for our workforce, and which a lot of places don't have. A lot of the maintenance organizations out there are struggling to find mechanics and that kind of stuff. And we're kind of lucky to have some that graduate here and say, you know what, I kind of like Lynchburg and I want to stay here, and we'd love to have the opportunity to work for you. So we actually have a pile of applicants on our desk that but now we need the new facility to take the next step in growth again, because we've already outgrown this one.
And one of the other things that you guys, continue to build upon is your flight school at Bonaire. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, after the Liberty Flight School and I had North American Flight Center, which was another flight school I built. I said, well, I'm not really interested in getting back in the flight school business.
And here we are.
Yeah, but here we are, Shows you how well I know when I'm playing in Ridge. I really got it all planned out. But no, we did it this time because I wanted to be able to start getting pilots in the right seat, the co-pilot seat, and so I started what's called a PDP program, a pilot development program, that I was able to actually get approved by the FAA and by our insurance company, which is harder than the FAA these days. But what it allows us to do is be able to put young, low-time pilots in the right seat of the jets. And so once they get their commercial rating and their multi-engine, and now I can put them into the right seat.
Okay, explain the right seat.
The right seat's the co-pilot seat.
Okay.
And so this is for our smaller jets that we can actually fly single pilot too. And so the whole purpose of the pilot development program is I went and told the FAA and the insurance company, I can train these guys to be an adequate co-pilot in the right seat. Let us train them, give them a checkout, which is a SIC, which is a second in command check ride is what it's considered. And then with that, we can put them in at 500 hours, whereas before they wanted 1,500 hours, and that's when the airlines are going to poach them and take them anyway. So we got all this approved, and so that with our flight school now, our instructors, they come and they instruct and they build time. That way we can get to know who they are, their personalities, that kind of stuff. And then we take the top ones and put them in our PDP program and start giving them jobs on the right seat of the jets. And they do that for about a year, build 100 to 200 hours, and then provided that they've done everything good, then we'll make the investment to send them to their full type rating school, which is through a full motion sim. It's a $35,000 investment per airplane. And so at that point we say, okay, now you've gone through the program, and we're going to pay for your school, and we're gonna keep you here working for us.
So let's talk about pilots for a second, because you're recruiting pilots, you're training pilots in the flight school. We're seeing a lot with AI and drones and technology. Is that a good career for young people to pursue? Or is it something that, by the time they get into it in 10, 12, 15 years, may be obsolete because, AI or computers or whatever are flying planes everywhere?
Yeah, I wish I had that crystal ball because I'd be a lot better than I am. But honestly, it's where we are is pilots. We're not going to see pilots go away in this generation. I think that down the road, yeah. But the FAA is slow to react, and when you have hundreds of people, sitting on one airplane, and you only get one shot up there too, So AI is definitely going to be implemented in aviation. I mean, it's without a doubt. But I think that the pilots are still going to be playing a factor in these airplanes, at least for the next 30 years.
Really? Okay.
Now, how much of it? That's the thing is, do you go from 2 pilots down to 1 pilot, and 1 pilot's there to monitor and make sure the AI is doing that kind of stuff? I don't know that answer.
Right.
I wish I did. But we're starting to really incorporate AI on our side, on the maintenance side of the house, and so there's things that it can do that really trims down the cost and workload. So every time you turn a screw on an airplane or you put a new screw in, it has to be logged in what's called a logbook. So everything that's ever been done to an airplane maintenance wise is logged. And so what we're doing is we're actually taking AI and laying it over that 40-year history of that airplane. And it's building that database that a lot of times I'll have it in my head and say, oh, wait, 20 years ago we had this problem and this was what the problem was. Well, a computer can do it much better and much faster and sit there and say, oh, you've actually had this problem 3 times, and every time this was the issue. So what it'll do is it'll cut down on our troubleshooting time for the mechanics. It'll cut down on potentially ordering the wrong part, and then you go and put a $10,000 part in, and that doesn't fix the problem. And that's what we really want to try to hone in on. So AI is going to be a part of aviation. How big? I mean, I think, probably it might one day replace, all the pilots, but I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be in this generation.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but both of your kids are involved in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, my daughter has her pilot's license. My son's working on his. My daughter actually handles payroll and everything for the company. She's an international business major, and so that fits into kind of what she's doing. My son, he's a big fly fisherman and outdoor guy, and so I'm trying to talk him into kind of doing the bush pilot thing and going out and flying and landing on riverbeds and taking guys out fly fishing and bone fishing and doing all that kind of stuff. But so they both have interest in it, but a little bit different directions.
Well, and obviously, I mean, you feel good enough about the industry as a whole to bring your kids into it,
absolutely.
Knowing that there is a future, right? And I think for a lot of people now, we're all sitting here wondering, going, as the world changes so quickly because of computers and AI, like what industries are going to change, what's safe, or what's a good industry for our kids to get involved in. And you think, aeronautics, aerospace, airplanes, I mean, it's good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, once again, it's just, how, when's it going to change over and will it all completely? I'm not smart enough to know that, Rich. I mean, I wish I was, but, that's, kind of like you hear all these kinds of rumors too, that Elon's going to buy Spirit Airlines and make it completely AI, I mean, and guess what? Who could afford to do it?
Well, I mean, guess who's got the mental ability to probably make it happen?
He's landed rockets backwards, and I mean, has the whole world surrounded by satellites. So yeah, he can probably make that happen. Right. But I just, but the timing on it, getting it approved. I mean, the FAA is very slow compared to other organizations to make changes, and they do that in the name of safety.
Yeah, sometimes. I was going to say, is that a good thing?
Well, it can and it can't. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. I mean, it's, but everything is over methodical with the FAA. So the time of getting something approved for the road versus the air is going to be a big, big difference.
Kyle, you just moved into a new hangar, a bigger space, right, to accommodate everything and the growth of Bonaire. You're looking to build another even bigger hangar to keep growing. Talk about what's next for you guys. What's the future for Bonaire?
Yeah, we want to continue out into the fleet. We've got a lot of ability still on the organ procurement side to continue expanding in that market. Mm-hmm. So we actually have 3 more jets that are going to be here probably underneath our control and operation here in the next 30 to 45 days. As I said earlier, on the maintenance side, really expanding on the maintenance side and doing more on that side. And that's why we want the bigger hangar. But, just like anything, it has to be a controlled growth. And that's what we're really trying to stay focused on, is making sure that we're growing in a controlled way. So, that those are going to be the next big steps. And as I'm making sure that they're done right, I'll probably think of something else. But I don't have that forethought right now.
As you look ahead and, and see, what you've already done, right? And what you're looking at doing and continuing to build for Bonaire. The number of planes in your stable, so to speak. Do you think people here realize how significant it is? Because it's one of the largest, if not the largest, in Virginia. Am I right on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in probably 5 to 6 states, we've got one of the biggest fleets. So, I mean, we've got 10 that are on charter certificate right now. And so I don't know many other operators. I can't think of one in the tri-state region that have any more than that. So, yeah, 10, and then with 3 more, that'll be 13. And I think by the end of this year, we'll be at 15 to 16, and that'll definitely put us on the East Coast as one of the bigger operators. Now, I mean, our fleet and what we do with our fleet is it's a floating fleet.
What does that mean?
So we have bases. So we have one that's based in Kansas City. We have one that's based in Chicago. We have one in Philadelphia, one in New York. And then we rotate those airplanes out and bring them back here for the maintenance and everything. But with our home base being here in Virginia, we're definitely we're up there as one of the largest fleets on the East Coast.
What do people need to know about Bonaire? I mean, obviously they can rent planes if they. And we talked about some of the goodwill stuff that you're doing, but my understanding, and we were out of town, but EC Glass just won a lacrosse championship, and I understand you flew some parents up there to see the game. Yeah,
there's some parents that weren't going to be able to make it, and so and I wanted to go watch the game too, and so that was the purpose of the trip. Is I said, hey, we'll all go up there, and we'll watch, and we'll all fly up there. Well,
so you wanted to go?
Well, yeah, and then
I
had a pilot that couldn't fly on another one of the airplanes, so I had to cover that airplane. Didn't get to go, but I'd already told the families that we were going, so I still sent the airplane and sent them up. And they had a good time. But yeah, I mean, as far as Bonaire goes, aviation's is a confusing thing, and so a lot of I always encourage people don't hesitate to ask. And so I mean, if anybody listening, or anybody has a question on aviation or anything we can help you with, call us. I mean, that's one of the things we're lucky is I've been in this industry for our family's been in it for 3 generations now, and my kids are going to be 4th generations, and so there's not a whole lot in that time that kind of hadn't come across our plate, so to speak. And so we know, we don't know much about a lot, but we know a lot about aviation. So, that's kind of.
All right. So for folks who aren't, super aware or super dialed in and might be considering, hey, look, I think it'd be cool to own, to own a plane, or I think it'd be cool to get my pilot's license and be able to fly a little bit. I mean, what is this one of those deals where if you have to ask the cost, then you can't afford it? Or
no,
I mean, is it reasonable to get a license? Is it reasonable to own a plane or part of a plane?
Not necessarily. I mean, aviation's not cheap. I mean, you're, right now, I mean, especially with fuel price and everything else, I mean, it's just, it's not a cheap thing to get into. But if you have a business need for it, and you've got, your time management and all that kind of stuff comes into play. People that want to get their pilot's license and get into the industry doing that. Yeah, I mean, it's, you're looking at, well over probably $100,000 to build up to that point, But what you can do is you're building, once you get up to certain levels, then you're being able to build your time and make money back on it as well. So that's where. So
you're saying $100,000 just to be able to fly?
If you wanted to go straight from your private all the way up to your commercial and flight instructors, that's probably what you're looking to spend.
Wow.
If you weren't going to flight instruct and make money back on it and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not involved with the degree programs and stuff like that. And I'm not really involved much on the flight school side of it now as well. But I focus mainly on the jets. But that's where everybody's got people that can sit there and give you the hard numbers. But it never hurts to make the call. Right? You never know what it can open up to.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, the opportunity to make money while you're doing it. Right. I mean, flying different things. And then, I mean, pilots, at least commercial pilots, my understanding, pretty decent money.
So what you do is you get your private, your instrument, and your commercial, and then you can become a flight instructor. And so then as you're instructing, then you go out and as you're now teaching people to fly, you're building up your hours as well.
Okay.
So that's what it takes is really to get to that 500 hours where you're hireable even by me for the PDP program. That's what everybody's trying to get. And really, people are trying to get to the 1,000-hour marks. And I mean, you never have enough hours. Now, I finally got to where I have enough hours.
Oh, wow.
I mean, but yeah, I don't even really have to track them anymore. But I mean, that's everybody's trying to get to that next level always and build as many hours as possible.
As we look at Bonaire, we talked about the flight school. One other thing that I'll throw out there, the discovery flights. You guys are doing those for $100. Talk about that for a second for people who are interested in learning more.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a cool way to come out, see if you like being in a small airplane. You can see if getting bumped around a little bit doesn't bother you. Going up, seeing the city, going out, flying around Smith Mountain Lake, that kind of stuff for $100. You and two other people can go up in one of our flight training airplanes and touch and feel and sit in the airplane and actually go out and see the beautiful hill city here, and see if it's something you like and see if you want to go farther with it.
Any chance of getting you back in the fantasy football league?
Y'all have made so many rules that I can't even have fun anymore. It's the no fun league. Y'all just shut down all the good time I was having.
I blame Anderson. Yeah. I'm out of that for now.
Yeah, I don't know. You were the commission at the time. All of a sudden there'd be a new set of rules.
Always new rules.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll talk about it. It's just like when you kicked me out that time, and then draft night, because someone else drops out. Hey, Kyle, welcome back. We'll talk about it on draft night.
I think you deserve to be kicked out.
I don't think so. There was not a rule for it. It's the free market league, Rich.
It was.
Yeah,
it's not anymore.
No.